Welcome to Chief Evangelist. I'm your host, Ethan Beute. I'm on a mission to explore and understand the role of the Chief Evangelist and the movement behind it. How should founders, investors, and C-suites be thinking about it? How does it benefit the company? Which companies and markets need evangelism most? What does the work involve? What does success look like? And who's a good fit as a Chief Evangelist? That's what we're exploring at chiefevangelist.com. and in conversations like this one, which is brought to you by Ringmaster Conversational Marketing and their evangelist-powered podcasting package. Learn more at ringmaster.com. Today we're learning from the co-founder and CEO of PartnerHacker. He's also the Chief Ecosystem Officer at Reveal. He evangelizes the concept of Nearbound. His vision is partner-led everything. He published a manifesto explaining these ideas titled Trust is the New Data. He advises a variety of companies. His background is in partnerships and business development with leaders like Drift and PandaDoc. And today he's joining us from Paris. Jared Fuller, welcome to Chief Evangelist.
Hey, happy to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. I've always said that I'm a market-led entrepreneur. And what that means is it starts with the people and where they are and what they care about and how they think and how they talk, not inside the walls of your company. So you've created a great watering hole here, as I like to call them.
Appreciate it. It's been a joy for me. I've learned a ton, and I don't think about anything the same way anymore.
Right.
From when I started this back in the fall. It's also interesting too. You make me think that we're going to maybe wind up talking go to market. I don't know if we're now partly offended by even the language of that, like as if going to, like as opposed to going into market. But before we get into all of that, because you're so clear on where we are in B2B sales, B2B marketing, getting into the market, this concept of Nearbound, which we'll unpack, I think it'll resonate with every evangelist, no matter their position. Before we get into all that, I'd love to start with the most important job of an evangelist. When I ask you that, Jared, what comes to mind?
Well, I think the most important thing by far to me is that anyone that knows me knows that I'm genuine. That's because I only talk about the things that I care about deeply. So to me, I would say that passion is the primary ingredient to my being. And I think that is by far the most important thing in terms of being an evangelist is you better have the passion. You can't really fake passion. You can fake enthusiasm, you can fake excitement, but passion comes from like this really honest, genuine, deep connection with the topic. And it typically comes from some sort of earned secret or struggle that you wrestled with something very intimately for a long time, and you may have found a better way. So that interconnectedness between who you are and your story to the better world that you're trying to create, you can't be faked. So for example, hiring just another chief evangelist, so to speak, in a co-working space for the first time here in Paris, you can't just hire someone. This isn't like you hire a marketing coordinator and they become your evangelist. I truly believe that. Anyone that was in that function or role without some connectedness to the task at hand for the customers, I don't think it's going to be genuine. Our BS and sniff detectors are at an all-time high, and the reality is that we only trust people who've been to the places that we want to go. Like, that's how we buy today. We buy not by asking how questions. We don't buy by going to Google. Like, it's crazy. This was just a few years ago. We don't go to Google, how do I do X? No, you go, who has done Y? And what that means is that the way that we have to sell has to change. The way that we have to market has to change. And the role of the evangelist plays, I think, an increasingly very important role.
Very good. I hear in your response, especially right off the top, I don't know that I've had the founder evangelist on yet. That's obviously you in this case. And what I also heard in there was the word, you didn't use this word, but it was like tied right in there as you were separating enthusiasm from passion.
Yes.
To me, there's something in the way that you talked about it, there's like an integrity there, like it is true to who I am and I am being true to it about me. And there's also the sincerity. When I think about the BS detector, I think what we're really detecting is sincerity. Does this person believe what they're saying? And therefore, can I believe it? And do they seem to care about what they're saying? And therefore, might I care about it? Do they seem to care about me? This kind of getting into Nearbound a little bit more. Do they seem to care about me therefore I care more about them. And that's all wrapped in there. Talk about your how helpful it was, because I think you've only been on this particular journey and mission that you're on at present for about a year. Talk about the momentum that you had by being so clear about this point of view about the market, about the world. Like, how much more helpful was it to you to get going into PartnerHacker and Reveal as a founder evangelist, as opposed to, say, maybe a technical founder who had a technical solution to a problem?
Ethan, an audience, the degree to which I was ready for this question in this moment is a decade in the making. And I genuinely mean that. I founded a SaaS company called JobHive in the early 2010s, and I'm dangerous at sales. So dangerous that I raised at a $40 million valuation pre-product from Foundry Group. And I was like 22. Like, I got Brad Feld to invest in me. So like, I knew I was a good salesperson, but I realized that there was this class of entrepreneurs that seemed like they had the answers to the test. And I didn't have the answers to the test. I was making everything up as I went along, and I could sure sell, but I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. And after that company failed I gave a 3-hour podcast on that whole like journey. It's pretty wild. I really, really, really knew that the next thing that I did where I took it on, I was not going to fail. It was 100% success rate. But I took a run. I did PandaDoc from 0 to 20,000 customers. I did Drift and built the global ecosystem there. But the reason why I went to like a Drift is because of David Cancel and Elias Torres, who sold Performable to HubSpot. And I sat down with Brian Halligan, the CEO of HubSpot, when I was doing the negotiation of PandaDoc Series B with HubSpot. It was HubSpot Venture's first ever venture investment. So like, I'm still pretty good at sales. I'm doing this partnerships thing. I'm helping lead these companies. And Halligan told me that David Cancel was the most important entrepreneur in B2B SaaS. I'm like, well, I thought you were. Like, you're Brian Halligan, HubSpot, Inbound, right? So like, I went from failing a company to sitting at the table with the people that I admired most in the world. And David asked me to come help build the ecosystem at Drift. And I did that for one reason and one reason alone, is I wanted the answers to the test. And here's the answers to the test. There's 3 types of entrepreneurs. There's builders, there's geniuses, and there's pros. Builders have a hammer and they're looking for a nail. That's 90% of entrepreneurs, right? They're solving for themselves. I have this thing, don't you want to buy it? Who can I can't tell you how frustrating it is to me that people do ICP hopping. You don't know your customer? What the heck are you building? To me, that just blew my mind that that's what I was doing. But then that's not what the people that win, they don't ICP hop. It's like, okay, so this builder profile, you can make it, but the odds are not in your favor. Then there's the geniuses, and they have a 10x technological innovation, right? A true transformative change thing. That's not me. I'm not the person that's going to come up with some novel technical invention that changes the game. But the challenge with that is that, geniuses quickly realize that great product never beats great go-to-market. And even then, great go-to-market never beats great ecosystem. And then there's this third one. And the third one I refer to as pros. And here's what pros do. And this is tying it back to the evangelist concept very cleanly. Is the very first thing that pros do is they choose, there's only a couple at any given time, but an undeniable shift in the world, right? For all of us. Like, we're talking humanity at its current moment in time and what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So I saw David call out messaging and AI in 2015 as a macro trend, right? That messaging was going to eat everything, and then AI assistants would facilitate. I mean, how right was he? Like 100% right. So this undeniable shift of how we communicate from cold calls to like SMS style, obviously correct. And then you choose the market. So what about my background serves me to best serve this audience? Paul Graham calls it an earned secret, right? So you've gone through something, some trials, some tribulations, some struggle, and you went, aha, here's how I get to the other side, right? So then that anchors you to consumer or enterprise. And then it anchors you to a persona, right? Is it sales, marketing, success, IT? And then you have your customer, right? That's your market. Market, undeniable shift, the earned secret that you have, the exact customer that you have the experience and relevance and honesty to. And then here's what you do. You own the audience, and then you build the product. That's literally the exact opposite of how 90% of businesses are built today, right? I would say that the other 8% are probably geniuses that build really cool things, right? And then there's like this 2 to 1% that those are the people that Sequoia just cut $15, $20 million checks for walking in the office, right? DC didn't even have a product. He walked into CRV and Izar, $15 million Series A, just because he walked in the door, right? Because he knew. He's like, you know what you're doing. And of course he did, a couple $1 billion outcome. So that to me is like the power that entrepreneurs have at their disposal to be the evangelist, right? To create a category and a movement. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I really felt that segment, that the builders, the geniuses, the pros, the evangelists out there listening to this, you have a really good shot at an entrepreneurial future. It might be the other thing that I might eke out of that.
Yeah, and it's this pro thing, and it's this idea of I'm just kind of saying it back so you can kind of clarify and redirect if I mistook any aspect at the end there of I know the market, I have a trend, I know the market, I know the customer, I'm dialed in at some level to a persona within this broader group, and I'm going to build for them after I already have all that understood and identified.
Yeah, and what I would say is, owning the audience, what that means is that you're serving the audience, you're helping the audience, right? There's something coming, there's something happening, right? There's old world and there's new world, there's winners and there's losers, and your voice should be authentic towards helping people reach their promised land, right? So when I say own the audience, evangelism doesn't happen in a vacuum. Evangelism happens in the market, right? You have a community, you have events, you have distribution, you have podcasts, you have videos, you have all of these things. The point is that evangelism happens where people live. So you can't do that through a product. You cannot do evangelism through SaaS, right? You do evangelism through your voice. And that's what I did. So it was a roundabout way that I got to PartnerHacker specifically. So launching a media company first and then getting into it. But I started a podcast called Partner Up to get the answers to the test from presumably people much smarter than I about partnerships. And through that journey of like starting it and why I started is there just was no information, like literally none about partnerships for B2B SaaS. It'd always been a secret weapon of mine. So did that. But then what you quickly realize is, oh no, everyone's looking for this information. And that there was an undeniable shift happening in the world. I was firmly convinced that go-to-market, I will try to not say anything too disparaging on here, but if you're listening to this right now and you've sat through a sales and marketing meeting in the last 6 months and you had a sales and marketing alignment, please tell me how it was any different than 2014. It's the same. Like nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Like the same sales and marketing alignment meetings, the same board meetings, the same operating models, the same ivory tower intellectualism that we put an operating model at the center of all of our executive conversations. I was so sick of that I'm like, this has to break. And then I saw the impending recession coming with the, just dollars flowing everywhere. I'm like, the thing that's going to come next, that's something that I have to participate in. So that's actually where the evangelism came from, was like, I have a role to play, and I created that role first. I started a podcast by myself, and then co-founded PartnerHacker with my business partner, Isaac Morehouse, who's one of the best content marketers out there. And we started with a narrative, launched with the manifesto, right? So I could get into the back half of that story and how we get to Nearbound, but very intentional. Like I recruited Isaac specifically, and we knew exactly what we were going to do. All the way through the end, in a year.
And I feel like you probably, just going to the manifesto, and then we'll get into this concept of Nearbound, because again, I think it's super relevant to everyone who listens to this show. And thank you for everyone who has found this show and reached out to me. I'd love to hear from anyone who's checking it out.
That's awesome.
Thank you. So I have a feeling that manifesto was simply a matter of you and Isaac expressing what you already knew, what you already thought, or was the exercise of the manifesto part of the kind of the discovery and the concept organization? What I'm suggesting is that the manifesto was in you and it was just a matter of organizing and expressing it, but maybe talk about that process.
That's why I had to tell the builder, genius, and pro story. And that's not to self-ascribe myself to, the latter half. Although the point was I failed the company in 2014, B2B SaaS. And then I saw the best and the worst of it, venture back, Sequoia, Foundry, failure, great outcome, 2 unicorns back to back. And then what I realized was the undeniable shift is the most important thing to nail, right? So I actually worked on that for 2 years. Now, not full time, but what I was doing is I had this running doc and I was like, what is the thing that's going to change? And in this, the PartnerHacker manifesto, it's called Trust is the New Data. I actually had to eke out this like base concept over many, many, many conversations. And that this document probably didn't have, it didn't have that much content, but it was changing just a little bit here and there. And what I kind of anchored it to was these 3 eras. And I knew we were entering a new era. The first era was about the digitization of sales activities. It's very clear to me that that was the case. And it wasn't cloud, but it was digital data, right? So everything was brand world, offline, direct response, that's it. And that world was actually a channel world. It was like you had to go to local partners to put the thing in to advertise, radio, whatever. Everything, 100% of trade was pretty much, channel and partnerships related, but through another name. But then this digitization of sales happened and sellers could have a list and make a call, right? They could send an email. So a little bit peeled off, it was more cost effective, right? And then the cloud happened. So that's the next era, right? The next era was the era of marketing automation. Right? So on top of this data precipitated by the invention of the cloud, we could automate everything. And boy, did we sure do that. Clive Humby in 2006 boldly proclaimed that data was the new oil. And he was right. It was the new gold. It was the new oil. Just look at the market cap of, Salesforce 2006 to 2020, right? Any company that was playing in the data space, Snowflake, to even Amazon. Right? Like Amazon's a data company, AWS, all of these things and all of this wealth was created around data. But then around 2020, 2019, and me getting sick of marketing and sales alignment meetings and all of that, I was like, there's another era coming though. This isn't going to last. We've all, a lot of us have been in B2B tech for a while. I definitely remember just like it was yesterday when HubSpot was like, launched, when there was 150 MarTech companies. Now there's 12,000, right? Like my email is not just like, it's crazy to think it could have gotten any worse than like 2 years ago, but it's exponentially worse. Like it is known that I don't even respond to email. Like I don't respond to any email. I don't answer any phone calls. None. Like I have to have someone from the company bug me to respond to an email. It's impossible. I've set up every filter and it's just like, I'll unsubscribe from 20 in a day and I'll get 40 net new subscriptions. And I know this because I just spun up a new domain and the degree to which I filled that up, it's just impossible. It's impossible. There's no way you can say that sales digitization through outbound and that marketing automation to try and bring people inbound is somehow magically going to get better. So there had to be something else. And I went, there's these things that started to happen, and this is what I put in the manifesto. And this is why the evangelist thing is it should be genuine and passionate. These are experiences that should be lived that you can speak to. Have you Googled anything recently and just been like, what? Does Google work anymore? It's very strange. It's very strange because I used to Google everything, but now it's like, just a simple thing like, what temperature do I cook bacon at in the oven? You did not realize that you were going to spend 20 minutes on that question. It's like, what is bacon and the origin of pork? And it goes through these 5, and it's like, just tell me the dang temperature. It's like these 15 listicle SEO optimized drivel. Like, nobody wants that. That's not what I want. That's what you want. You want to game the system to get my click so that and that's what Google wants. Google wants me to spend more time on page, go through more listings to play the game. But that's not what I want. That's not what you want. Same thing with review sites, right? Review sites, like all of a sudden, every single review site is 4.7 stars. Like every single one. It's really weird. It's strangely weird. And it's like it's just not helpful. Like all games get gamed. And that's what I started to realize is that the time was up. Pandemic happened, all these things. And I went, I think data obviously is still the king. You have to have your data correct. But the aha moment was I went, I think the major shift is that how we buy this is how I buy. How I buy is even in B2B SaaS. If let's say needed a new forecasting tool. Like, hey, I'm spinning up a new sales org and, I've been doing, spreadsheet forecasting. Hey, I need to go check out what's new in forecasting. What am I going to do? I don't Google it. Absolutely not. I don't go to a review site. I go to a community. And I look through and I see who's posted recently about this. Like, okay, some conversations about forecasting tools. And then I see that my buddy Taft had posted about Clary. And I trust Taft. He's really amazing at RevOps. And so I pinged Taft and I go, hey, I saw this thread about Clary. I was a big fan of Insight Squared, and no shade to anyone, just an example. I was a big fan of Insight Squared. You think I should move forward with Clary? Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll hop on a call with you next week and get it all set up. That's how we buy, Ethan. That's how we buy. Trust was data was the new oil until data lost all of our trust. Now we only trust people who've been to the places that we want to go. Like that's genuinely how we travel, even like how we buy a car. And it's crazy to think that it's shifted so quickly. And that's why this era is fundamentally different. People are in control.
I feel like it's a return to where we've been, right? It's a normalization back to how we came to thrive as a social species.
Yeah.
So an interesting layer I want to add or give back to you to respond to is, you knew Taft in your scenario there. What I'm suggesting to folks who are building communities, running communities, I feel like the curation of who's in and who isn't in and why they're in and or why they're out is also part of it, because we don't always know all of the people in the community. There's something to the community itself. And I'll go to one like Pavilion. It's big. It's a heck of a lot bigger than when I joined it. Right. But there's it says something when someone from Pavilion reaches out in that way. It's just a little trust symbol or a trust marker. But as folks are building community, which we talk about periodically on the show, I think this idea of curating the community, who's in and who isn't, that trust layer starts with the community itself and then goes to the individual, especially to the degree that you can get to know that individual. But I agree with you completely that we're going to practitioners who I either know and trust or in a context that I know and trust for that feedback. It's essentially a review, but much more direct and much more trustworthy.
Well, what I would say is that one of the phrases that I haven't been able to get out of my head for a year since I wrote it is that, trust comes from helping people reach their promised land. And we only trust people that have been to the places we want to go. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't mean that I have to know that person, but I am going to vet my decision-making process on the credentials of the person and whether or not there is a signal that they're the thing to help me do the thing. The product is actually secondary. A lot of things are secondary. It's the person, right? It's the relationship. It's their credentials. And that's when you start to recognize that if how we buy is fundamentally changed and we've exited what I call the how economy to the who economy, Like that's kind of like our narrative. How economy to who economy? It's your network. It's the people closest to you. We've had this retreat to these, relationships because there is too much information, right? And AI certainly will make many, many, many parts of our lives exponentially better. But I can tell you this right now, it's not going to fix outbound and it's not going to fix inbound. It's going to make something different emerge where how we make decisions about these bigger things, it's going to be with people. And then how they get enacted is probably going to be with AI. So I think having that very strong point of view, like even how we launched this, Ethan, is like, I got up on a soapbox at an industry event and, I gave this speech, trust is the new data, and it got recorded and it's kind of like this, but the people there were like, that was the best speech I've heard ever. And it was impromptu. And it's like, well, because I've been working on this for 2 years. Not that speech, but like really making sure that the undeniable shift, my earned secret, the anecdotes that I could speak to, like, data, we're so awash with data that we don't even trust ourselves to make purchases anymore. Hey, I'll give you a crazy example. I went to Amazon and saved for later, this button that just, got added during the pandemic. And I saw that my wife has 200 products in there. Like she can't even trust herself to make a decision on that, right? But there's reviews, there's all the gamified stuff inside of Amazon. But you know what she does? She goes to Instagram, right? And she finds people that have already done the thing that she's trying to do. That's where that comes from. It's how we live. And I feel like evangelists out there, if you really want to nail it where your audience is like, man, you get me, just be you, do the thing that you're doing, like live that world. And then you can tell that story, right? Very honestly. And people go, yeah, I totally get that, right? My partner does the same thing, right? Or, I do the same thing. And that's how you break through in this world of messaging. You're not going to break through with SEO. You're going to break through with relevancy, right? And that genuineness of like, I've done the thing that you're trying to do.
Hey, thanks for listening to Chief Evangelist. For so many reasons, podcasting is a great opportunity and channel for evangelism. If you've been thinking about a podcast or you want to shift production and promotion to a team that's especially evangelist friendly, check out ringmaster.com. Their Connect, Engage, Scale program is designed for evangelist-powered podcasting for software and tech companies in the growth stage. Again, you can learn more at ringmaster.com. They're also the team behind this podcast. Speaking of Chief Evangelist, let's get back to it. Man, okay, so you broke down the evangelist right off the top of that response. And in your case, it's, I know that there's something I want to solve. Who do I know, right? It's this who, not how, not go to Google, figure out how to cook bacon. That's not a great, it's like, who do I know who and that's exactly what I would do, by the way. Like,
well,
the
that's
next
what you need
time,
AI for, by the way, is the bacon. You just need the answer. You don't need it. Like, you just need the answer.
So we're going to the who. We're not trying to solve it ourselves. We're trying to get a jump at least halfway down the road from someone who we know and trust, who's been there before. And so what I'll suggest to kind of start getting into this Nearbound concept, because I'd love for you to be very explicit about it for folks.
Yes.
Is that the evangelist is that practitioner. The evangelist has done that before. The evangelist has faced that before. They're not a spokesmodel. They're not a even, and I don't mean this with any derision whatsoever, they're not an influencer or a creator per se, although they might have some of those skills. They are a practitioner first and foremost who knows the thing. They know the customer, and they go out into the market. They live among the customers and the ideal customers. And in this way, people can be introduced to them, and those people can also be introduced to the ideas, the practices, these things, because we're often evangelizing things that people would never Google. I didn't even know I had this problem, right? That's what I've been doing for a decade at BombBomb. Right. No one thinks, oh my gosh, I need to stop relying on faceless typed out text for some of my emotional or nuanced or detailed responses to people, because it'd be so much better if I sent it in a video. How do I do that? Very few people, certainly a decade ago, were asking that question. You need to go out and introduce this idea that you're putting yourself at risk to be misunderstood or ignored or deleted if you don't humanize and add some of those human elements to some of your faceless digital communication. The evangelist is out in market. They're connecting, they're learning, they're validating, they're developing, they're teaching, they're engaging. How fundamental is that role or that concept to Nearbound?
What I would say is that Nearbound is the operationalization of the relationships and the network across the entire business. And it changes or adds a layer to go to market across marketing, across sales, across products, across success, where you're looking at the market first and you're making your decisions based on what? The proximity and the strength of those relationships, right? Like the node bonding theory, like we're actually talking about network effects in building a business that's a little bit more sustainable. So if you're thinking about Nearbound, what it is it's, PartnerHacker to Nearbound. How did we get there, right? Is that I had this theory that we were exiting the sales digitization era, the marketing automation era, and then we're going to enter this ecosystem era. And I knew that partnerships were going to play a fundamental role because all software is connected, right? So like integrations at minimum was going to play a very massive role in this new decade, right? And that's obviously the case right now, even more than it was a year and a half ago. Like what we started to do is whenever we decided to launch PartnerHacker and we started to get this out there, we published, the PartnerHacker manifesto, and then we started to cover and go into the VC conversations. So we're having a great conversation. I appreciate everybody listening right now, but I was being asked into VC rooms that I wasn't being asked into before per se, to say, hey, Jared, we need to figure out partnerships because this isn't working and this isn't working. And then I covered stories about Bessemer Venture Partners releasing their State of the Cloud report. And that the number one trend for 2022 when I launched PartnerHacker, that every company was indirect partnerships from day one for every B2B company. I knew. I felt so good. I'm like, that is a seminal report from one of the most respected VCs. And they just 1 year before said to their portfolio companies, don't invest in partnerships until you cross $100 million in revenue. I mean, that's a giant, like, come on, that's night and day different, right? So we're in this new era. And then I went, partnerships though. So I knew we had to attach it to partnerships in this function, right? That's where the expertise was. And we had to start there, but that wasn't the destination. The destination was the enemy, right? Like go-to-market was so broken and they needed this other lever. So we built the audience of partnership professionals to kind of invert their role. And we grew PartnerHacker. I launched this in May. Isaac and I launched in May of 2022. And we announced our acquisition 9 months later by Reveal. And it was on purpose. Reveal announced that their category was Nearbound. And Reveal was a networked database. And you're like, what's a network database? Well, it's the sum of all of the data of not just your CRM, all of your partners' CRMs, and perhaps your customers. And the point is that the relationship is the thing that you have access to for the first time ever. So what it does is it inverts the partner function. And like how it's just crazy to think that the steps to get here. Get this, it changed everything from where partnerships stopped being a department and became a strategy for every department, right? And instead of calling it partnerships when marketing does it, when sales does it, what words did we already use? We use outbound, we use inbound, nearbound. So what we did is we took partnerships were like, hey, let me go work my partners, right? And maybe they'll register a deal with me, right? And I can give that to my sales team. And what were the sales team doing? Sending cold emails and making cold calls and, of course, responding to inbound when it happens. But the crazy thing is these channels were declining for sellers. And why didn't they get the answers to the test? For example, I was working at Drift. Let's say somebody bought 6 Cents, so ABM platform, a few weeks ago. And I know that they're one of my core partners. Well, what precipitated that purchasing decision? There's like some intel there, right? That's the proximity to that buyer is much closer through that than it is through Google, than it is through their website. And it allows and changes the role of partnerships to be an orchestration layer to bring Nearbound to the same level that inbound and outbound. You're just going to partners And and not just partners, right? So Nearbound is customers, it's community, it's influencers, it's anyone that has a relationship that matters, right? That trust, right? When I said trust is the new data, how perfect is that to tie together to Nearbound? And that's the category that we're creating. And I'm very honored to be in a position where like HubSpot, I love that company more than any company. It's my favorite SaaS company, just to see them crush it every step. And they're so nice and just amazing people. You're a role model, right? The executives themselves, the company, they've always been a role model to me. To like go to their events and hear them talking about it. Wild. But I think that's the opportunity of having the answers to the test and like actually living the experience. Live in the market. That's what I always say. I've ditched go to market, and I tend to say live in market. And if you genuinely care about the things that not everyone cares about, but some cohort is, you can actually be a really, really, really great leader and call your shots and get things done and create a movement in record time. So it's been a heck of a year and a month, right? So we launched a media company, had a multi-million-dollar acquisition, and then created a category. And it's, obviously we're nowhere near outbound or inbound in terms of adoption, but you would be very surprised to see the people that are utilizing that verbiage and implementing it across the C-suite, CMOs and CROs from a word that did not exist 6 months ago. We're doing it way faster than anyone that came before.
Yeah, I think just tying back to drift and messaging, I think if you looked at the onset of that, people say, oh, I don't know about all that. In this case, I feel like you have that same, you're identifying this trend. It's a real trend. And I think the adoption of the language that you just mentioned is a reflection of the fact that everybody knows that the first two phases that you outline in the manifesto they're not useless, but they're exhausted.
They're declining. There's no way you're going to look at that in 12 months and it look better.
Right. So I think everyone was ready for this language and this concept. It will take a while to catch, just like anything else. But you're obviously seeing positive signs, and so am I. It's the same reason I started this. Like I had a very deep conviction that this role of a practitioner who cares a lot, who knows a lot, who wants to engage a lot, is engaging in and of themselves at some level, being out in market to learn more and bring it back to the company, to take some of the core concepts, best practices from the company and from the broader community and bring that to life in like a sustained way, was a thing. And I want to talk to people who are doing it in different ways, and every episode is different.
And that's why we have a great show, because you actually care about the thing. You have a passion. And I'm assuming prior to having the podcast, Ethan, here's what you probably did, is I bet you had some great conversations with people that were serving in an evangelist role, right? And then I bet you had some people reach out to you asking how they should approach it.
100%.
And did you help those people?
Of course I did. I probably did 40 or 50 hours of free consulting over the past 2.5, 3 years. And a gentleman I was talking with, I pitched it to him. I was like, hey man, you and I have spent an hour and a half together, and I will never take a dime of your money. But do you think you personally, or do you think the company, if I had some kind of a, off the shelf framework that we could then kind of work through and customize together in a direct consultative way, is that something you would personally pay for? Do you think there'd be any budget in the company? He's like, listen, man, I don't know about all that, but you just mentioned like 10 of us, just get us together on a Zoom call and we'll hang out and we'll see what happens. And that was the genesis of it. And then, I had my first 10 guests already lined up. Like the first 10 guests that you see, if you go to chiefelvangelist.com or youtube.com/@chiefelvangelist, I was already in conversation with all of those people about their roles, what they were doing, what I was doing, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you're dead on with that. Question for you, because I know we're going to be up at time here soon. Attribution, it's one of the biggest challenges. What I feel like I heard a little bit in what you're talking about with Nearbound and Reveal reminds me a little bit of my conversation with Anthony Kenneda about owned media and finally getting some insight and attribution to some of this stuff that was essentially regarded as influencing a sale, but we could never draw a direct line of attribution.
See, here's the thing. Attribution is a red herring. The CFOs and ivory tower intellectuals and MBAs that have never walked like a step in the customer's shoes obsess over. And I will win that battle 100% of the time, 100% of the time, because I can prove that attribution does not work, period, full stop, and that it's useless. What you need to look at is attach. Not attribution, not source, attach. Anything that's attached to a conversion event, right? You can have 5 attaches, right? You just cohort it out. If a partner is attached, for example, to a lead, but then an ad was served and an email was served, well, we just look, okay, the partner attach did this to this lead. Well, the cohort of partner attached, does it perform better than baseline or worse than baseline? I've just solved it for you. It's really that simple. Just look at attach on marketing. Just look at attach on sales. Just look at attach on success. You don't need attribution. What you need is just to go, were they involved? Was there something there? And I think the point is what your customers care about are, the media is certainly, because I want to tie this back to why I think media is such an important vehicle right now, and community. And you hear of like Scott Leese, who's one of my big sales buddies. He's trying to evangelize go to network. And, he's kind of been seeing what I've been talking about with Nearbound and partnerships. And he's kind of like, yeah, I don't really, I don't answer my phone either, Jared. And I'm like, Scott to me is like one of the best VP of sales of all time. And he's saying, you can't do this anymore. Like everything that I've been teaching you and all these $100 million RevOrgs I built, gone. The smartest people I know, Jill Rowley, Brendan Cassidy, probably the GO VP of sales. Like none of these people are CROs or VPs of sales anymore. They're realizing something very important. And that is when you are a media company, the content is the product, right? The content must be consumed and it must help. When you are a community, the conversation is the product, right? When you are a product, the product is the product. And what you recognize is that, products are only used by people that pay for them. Right? It's at the end of the journey, not at the beginning. So all these other things that you do as a business, right? So evangelism, et cetera, that's why it becomes increasingly important, right? Like communities, media, and being able to produce things that help people from a genuine point of view that is not SEO optimized drivel, that isn't a gamified review thing, that isn't a cold email or a cold call. It isn't about you, it's about me and helping me because you have a perspective of a shared experience and you've been to the place that I want to go. The people that focus their efforts and their energy on helping their customers with those conversations in the community, right? The content that's for them. And then they build their marketing engine around, hey, let's do an event together with all of our partners in the ecosystem. Hey, instead of selling just directly like, hey, here's my product, why don't we integrate and make sure that we're working really well everywhere else versus round peg, square hole? Let's start there. And instead of serving customers myopically through the lens of, let's say, some retention or activation metric in the product, why don't we start with the people that are already doing business with them? Meaning like, I don't know, a marketing consultant or something like that, like thinking beyond your own walls and thinking where the customer lives. I'll leave you with this. The Nearbound world and the Nearbound era, it's not necessarily new, kind of like you were starting the conversation. It's what we've always kind of known. And it's so right in front of us. Name for me a single industry-leading company that is not a network effect in ecosystem business. The only one that I could think of was Netflix, and Netflix just got their butt handed to them with their walled garden, right? YouTube continues to be the most profitable money-making machine of all time, right? Because community, content, creators, like all this stuff, it's an ecosystem. There's a flywheel, there's community, and Salesforce, HubSpot, Microsoft, you name it, Amazon, the era's here. And like that conviction is very, very, very high. And I think that's the other thing is that your journey, I'll leave you with this last one. Your journey from whatever you're doing in interest to evangelist starts with curiosity, and then it moves to courage, and then it ends with conviction. And when you have conviction and you're passionate, go change the world.
So good. Two things before I let you go. This has been an absolute joy. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to the episodes. Thank you for living out so much of what we are exploring here on the podcast.
Thank you. I love this because literally it's been a 10-year journey to make sure I didn't screw this up. So like, I'm happy to share because it's literally been my focus to not mess this up.
So good. What is something you find yourself evangelizing in your own personal life?
I would say mental models and first principles. I'm a really big fan of like doing 10 things 1,000 times versus 1,000 things 10 times. So I'm always trying to get to the bottom of everything versus a priori knowledge versus posteriori. Like scientific method, that's great. You guys go do 1,000 studies. I need like that one thing. And I tend to like put that around the people that I know, love, and trust, is I try to have very common things in terms of first principles.
Really good. If folks want to follow up, connect with you, they're obviously not going to reach you by phone. Where would you send people that are interested in some of the themes and ideas that you laid out here? And I'll certainly link up the manifesto and some of the other things that we covered. I'll do that in the notes. But where would you send people that want to connect with you?
Yeah, just LinkedIn, Jared Fuller, JaredFuller. And if you want to know what's happening on everything Nearbound, so partnerhacker.com, and then go over to nearbound.com. So I think if we time this right, we might have an announcement. I don't know if I want to necessarily make that here.
Yeah,
go over to nearbound.com if you want to check it out. And then just hit me up on LinkedIn. I've helped, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds of hours over the past decade, about 3 to 5 hours a week of just helping people. So like how I was able to launch a community was directly through that.
Love it. He is Jared Fuller, spelled as it sounds. I am Ethan Beute. Last name is spelled Beute. Hit us both up on LinkedIn. Thank you, Jared, and thank you to everyone for spending this time with us on Chief Evangelist.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ethan, for the work that you do, and thanks y'all for listening. I think the future leaders are the current evangelists. Go get it.
That wraps up this episode of Chief Evangelist. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Ringmaster Conversational Marketing for helping bring these episodes to you. With any thoughts or questions about the Chief Evangelist role, message me on LinkedIn. I'm Ethan Beute, EthanBeute. For show notes and more of these conversations, visit chiefevangelist.com.